To read the mind of anyone, you must master 3 crucial techniques. These methods, when fully understood, allow you to effortlessly discern and grasp what others are thinking. Let me share a Buddhist tale that beautifully illustrates how to understand the thoughts of others. In a small village long ago, 2 brothers lived together. The older brother was blind and spent most of his time at home, while the younger brother worked hard as a farmer. Unfortunately, animals often invaded their farm, destroying their crops, which troubled the younger brother greatly. He thought of a solution, asking his blind brother for help in scaring away the animals. The younger brother built a small hut in the field and explained his idea. "Brother, when you hear any animal sounds, just shout to scare them away. This way, our crops will be saved." The blind brother agreed and began spending his days in the field. Whenever he heard an animal, he shouted, successfully protecting the crops. One day, a deer ran through the field, breaking the fence before fleeing. Shortly after, a king pursuing the deer arrived at the field and noticed the blind brother. The king asked, "Have you seen a deer here?" The blind brother replied, "Your Majesty, I am blind and cannot see a deer. However, I can tell you the animal that left my field is not worth chasing. You are wasting your time." The king, astonished by this statement, asked how the blind brother knew this. He questioned whether the blind man was lying, given his inability to see. The blind brother calmly explained, "Your Majesty, the animal you believe to be a deer is actually a pregnant doe. I have never heard of a king hunting a pregnant doe. That is why I suggest you abandon this pursuit." The king, perplexed, decided to verify this claim. He instructed his commander to capture the animal alive. When the commander returned, he confirmed the blind brother's statement. The deer was indeed a pregnant doe. The king, amazed, asked, "How could you possibly know this?" The blind brother responded, "Your Majesty, although I am blind, I have learned to perceive things through sound and observation of subtle cues. When the animal ran past, I noticed the softness of its steps and the gentleness of its movement. These clues led me to conclude it was a pregnant doe. While I cannot see, I have honed my ability to understand the world through other senses." The king, intrigued by this explanation, was compelled to test the blind man further. He said, "You have shown great wisdom, but I have another question for you. Tell me, is my wife faithful to me or not?" The blind brother hesitated and replied, "Your Majesty, this is a delicate matter. Are you certain you wish to know the answer?" The king insisted, "I must know. If you do not answer truthfully, I will have you punished." After a moment's thought, the blind brother said, "If you truly wish to know the answer, Your Majesty, I have one condition. Leave your wife alone with me in a room, and I will provide you with the truth." The king was initially furious at the request, but eventually agreed. He ordered his commander to ensure the blind brother and the queen were left alone in a secure room. Once inside, the blind brother said to the queen, "Madam, I wish to touch you to understand your nature." This enraged the queen, who began striking the blind man with her hands and feet, venting her fury. The blind brother endured the queen's assault and later emerged from the room to meet the king. He declared, "Your Majesty, your wife is not faithful to you." The king, incensed, drew his sword and approached the queen, demanding the truth. The queen, cornered and unable to deny the accusations, admitted her unfaithfulness. The king, overwhelmed with both anger and amazement, returned to the blind brother. "How did you know my wife was unfaithful?" he asked. The blind brother calmly explained, "Your Majesty, when I requested to touch her, she could have refused me with words. Instead, she resorted to violence and touched my entire body while attacking me. This behavior revealed her impulsiveness and lack of restraint. which is incompatible with faithfulness. A faithful person would have remained composed and responded calmly. The king, still astonished by the blind brother's sharp insights, asked yet another question. "Tell me, am I truly my father's son or someone else's child? This question has plagued my mind for a long time, and I demand an answer." The blind brother hesitated and replied, "Your Majesty, this is a deeply personal matter. Are you sure you wish to know the truth?" The king insisted, "I must know. If you do not answer me, I will not rest." The blind brother then said, "Your Majesty, I will tell you the truth, but you must first promise me that you will not grow angry with my answer." The king nodded and gave his word, saying, "I will not be angry. I just want to know the truth." The blind brother replied, "You are indeed your father's son, Your Majesty. However, you are also under the shadow of a miserly merchant." The king was shocked and demanded an explanation. He rushed to his mother and, with great urgency, asked her, "Mother, tell me the truth. Am I truly my father's child, or does the blind man speak of something I should know?" His mother sighed deeply and replied, "My son, you are indeed your father's child. However, during your upbringing, we often relied on the generosity of a miserly merchant. His influence shaped many aspects of our lives, and his frugal ways may have left a mark on you as well." Hearing this, the king felt a mix of relief and astonishment. He immediately returned to the blind brother and asked, "How did you know this about my life? How could you uncover such a hidden truth?" The blind brother responded, "Your Majesty, it is simple. You have asked me many questions, and I have provided accurate answers each time. Yet, despite this, I have not received a single reward from you. Your unwillingness to offer compensation, even out of gratitude, suggested to me that you are influenced by the shadow of a miserly nature, likely inherited or absorbed from someone significant in your life." The king burst into laughter and said, "You are truly wise, blind brother. Your insights have opened my eyes more than any sight could. Tell me, what is the source of your extraordinary understanding?" The blind brother smiled and replied, "Your Majesty, wisdom comes from attentiveness, observation, and inner stillness. I have learned to read the actions, words, and movements of others. From these, I can discern their thoughts and intentions. To truly understand the world, one must quiet the mind, focus on the present, and observe without judgment." The blind brother continued, "Your Majesty, I promise to tell you 3 techniques to understand the thoughts of others. These methods are simple, but require practice and patience. Let me elaborate on the second method, which focuses on facial expressions and their subtle cues." The blind brother explained, "The second technique is to observe facial expressions closely. The face is like an open book that reflects what lies within a person's mind and heart. Even if someone tries to hide their true feelings, their expressions often reveal the truth." He continued, "Pay attention to the small details of a person's face while you talk to them. For example, a genuine smile lights up the eyes and lifts the cheeks, while a forced smile only moves the lips. If someone narrows their eyes and furrows their brows, they are likely confused, thinking deeply, or feeling frustrated. A raised eyebrow often signals surprise or curiosity." The king listened intently as the blind brother shared more insights. "Your Majesty," he said, "the area between the eyebrows is particularly telling. When that space tightens or wrinkles, it suggests someone is pondering something challenging or experiencing inner conflict. Similarly, a clenched jaw or tightly pressed lips can indicate suppressed anger, stress, or disagreement." The blind brother then recounted a story to illustrate his point. "Once a merchant came to me seeking advice. He spoke calmly, but his eyes darted around and the corners of his mouth twitched nervously. Observing his face, I realized he was hiding something. When I gently questioned him further, he confessed he was worried about a business deal that had gone wrong. His face had revealed what his words did not. The king nodded, impressed by the depth of the blind brother's understanding. "What you say is remarkable," he said, "but how does one develop the ability to read such subtle signs?" The blind brother replied, "Your Majesty, this skill comes from mindfulness and focus. By staying present and truly paying attention to the person in front of you, you begin to notice the small details that others overlook. When the mind is calm and undistracted, you can read these signals as clearly as words in a book." He concluded, "The face is a mirror of the mind. If you learn to read it, you will understand much about the person standing before you. This knowledge, paired with a compassionate heart, can help you navigate relationships and make wiser decisions." The blind brother continued, "Now, Your Majesty, I will reveal the third technique to understand a person's thoughts. This method focuses on gestures and body language, the silent but powerful way people communicate without words." He explained, "Our bodies often express what our minds are thinking, even when we try to hide it. By observing gestures and movements, you can uncover a person's feelings and intentions. This is the language of the body, and it speaks volumes." The blind brother elaborated, "For instance, if someone crosses their arms tightly across their chest, they might feel defensive, closed off, or resistant to what is being said. On the other hand, if they lean forward while speaking, it often indicates interest and engagement. They are eager to listen and understand." He continued, "Hand movements are especially revealing. When someone uses their hands a lot while speaking, it may show they are passionate or trying to emphasize their points. But if their hands fidget or tap nervously, they might be anxious or uneasy. For example, tapping fingers rapidly can signal impatience or frustration, while a clenched fist might hint at suppressed anger." The blind brother shared another example. "A person who avoids facing you directly or constantly shifts their weight from one foot to another may be trying to escape the conversation. These small movements tell you that they feel uncomfortable or wish to end the interaction." The king was captivated by these insights. "Can this technique truly reveal someone's inner thoughts and emotions with such clarity?" he asked. The blind brother nodded and added, "Absolutely, Your Majesty." Body language is an honest communicator. People can control their words, but their gestures often betray what they truly feel. For instance, a person who tilts their head slightly while listening shows curiosity or interest. Meanwhile, a person who constantly touches their face might be deep in thought or uncertain about something. He then recounted an experience. "Once, I met a man who kept rubbing his hands together while speaking to me. Though his words were calm, this gesture showed nervousness and a hidden motive. By gently probing, I discovered he was worried about a decision he had made and was seeking reassurance without directly asking for it." The blind brother concluded, "Your Majesty, understanding body language requires focus and observation. Before you can interpret others, you must first calm your own mind and bring it fully into the present moment. Only then will you have the clarity to notice these subtle signs and comprehend their meaning." He added, "By combining the three techniques, paying attention to the eyes, observing facial expressions, and interpreting body language, you can gain a profound understanding of others. However, this skill demands practice and patience, and most importantly, it should always be used with kindness and respect." The king, impressed and enlightened, said, "Your wisdom is extraordinary. These techniques will not only help me understand others, but also guide me in becoming a better leader." The blind brother smiled and replied, "Your Majesty, wisdom is not just about understanding others, it is also about understanding yourself. Use these techniques not only to read others' thoughts, but also to foster compassion, build trust, and create harmony. As the blind brother finished explaining the techniques, he paused for a moment before saying, "Your Majesty, there is one final and crucial lesson you must remember. The ability to understand others is not just about observing their actions or gestures. It begins with mastering your own mind. Without inner peace and self-awareness, even the most advanced techniques will yield limited results." The king, intrigued, asked, "What do you mean by mastering one's own mind? How does it relate to understanding others?" The blind brother smiled and replied, "Your Majesty, the mind is like a mirror. When it is clouded with distractions, past regrets, or future anxieties, it cannot reflect clearly. To truly understand others, your mind must be calm, focused, and present. This clarity allows you to perceive subtle signals that most people overlook." He continued, "Meditation is the key to achieving this inner calm. When you meditate, you train your mind to remain still and focused, much like a candle flame undisturbed by the wind. With practice, this calmness becomes a natural state, enabling you to connect with others on a deeper level." The king, eager to learn, asked, "How should I begin this practice of meditation? What should I do to calm my mind?" The blind brother explained, "Start by setting aside a few moments each day to sit in silence. Find a quiet place where you will not be disturbed. Close your eyes and focus on your breath. Observe the air as it enters and leaves your body. If your thoughts wander, gently bring your attention back to your breath. This simple practice, done consistently, will help you cultivate awareness and stillness." He added, "As your mind becomes calmer, you will notice a shift in your interactions with others. You will begin to see beyond their words and actions, understanding their true feelings and intentions. This insight is not about judgment, but about empathy and connection." The king nodded, realizing the depth of the blind brother's wisdom. "I understand now," he said. "It is not enough to observe others. I must first observe myself. Only then can I lead with wisdom and compassion." The blind brother concluded, "Your Majesty, the greatest leaders are those who truly understand the hearts of their people. By calming your mind and practicing these techniques, you will not only gain insight into others, but also inspire trust and respect. Remember, understanding begins within." The king, filled with gratitude, bowed before the blind brother and said, "Your teachings have opened my eyes to a new way of thinking. I will practice these techniques and strive to become a ruler who leads with wisdom and understanding." The blind brother smiled and said, "May your journey be guided by clarity and compassion, Your Majesty. Always remember, the path to understanding others begins with understanding yourself." The blind brother, sensing the king's eagerness to delve deeper into understanding, offered one final piece of wisdom. "Your Majesty," he began, "there is an additional lesson, one that ties all these techniques together, the practice of compassion. Without compassion, even the keenest observation can turn into manipulation, and knowledge becomes a tool for personal gain rather than connection." The king, now deeply invested in the conversation, asked, "How does compassion help in understanding others?" The blind brother replied, "Compassion allows you to approach others not with judgment, but with genuine care. When you observe someone, do so with the intent to understand their struggles, joys, and fears, not to judge or exploit them. A compassionate heart will soften your gaze, and people will feel safe sharing their true selves with you. This safety is the foundation of true understanding." He continued, "Compassion also helps you remain patient. People do not always reveal their thoughts immediately, but when they sense your kindness, they open up in ways you cannot force. In this openness, you will find the clarity you seek about their minds and hearts." The king, reflecting on his earlier interactions, realized how often he had approached situations with impatience and a desire for control. "You are right," he said. "I have been quick to judge and slow to listen. Perhaps this is why I often feel disconnected from those around me." The blind brother nodded. "Your Majesty, to lead with wisdom, you must first lead with empathy. Start by listening without interrupting, observing without assuming, and responding with care rather than reaction. Over time, these habits will transform your understanding of others." He then shared a parable with the king to illustrate his point. Once, there was a river that flowed through a barren land. The river asked the desert, "Why do you reject me and refuse to flourish?" The desert replied, "You rush through me without truly understanding me. If you slowed down and embraced me gently, I would bloom." In the same way, when we approach others with care and patience, they blossom under our compassion. The king, moved by the story, said, "I will remember this lesson. I will strive to lead with compassion, observing and understanding others with a kind heart." The blind brother smiled warmly. "Your Majesty, the journey of understanding others is lifelong. It is a path that will challenge you, but it will also transform you. Remember, the mind can be sharp like a blade or soft like a spring. Balance the two, and you will not only read the minds of others, but also touch their souls." The king bowed in gratitude, saying, "Your wisdom has opened my eyes, dear brother. I am forever grateful for your guidance. From this day forth, I will work on calming my mind, observing with clarity, and leading with compassion." With those words, the king left the blind brother's presence, determined to implement the lessons he had learned. In time, he became renowned not just as a ruler, but as a leader who understood and cared deeply for his people. The blind brother, now left alone, smiled to himself. He had planted a seed of wisdom in the king's heart, and he knew that with care and effort, it would grow into a tree of understanding and compassion. But before the king could fully embody the lessons, there was one final truth that the blind brother felt compelled to share. The following day, the king returned to the blind brother, eager to share his reflections on the lessons he had learned. "I feel I have begun to see the world differently," the king said. "But tell me, what more must I learn to master the art of understanding others?" The blind brother nodded and replied, "Your Majesty, the ultimate key to understanding others is to understand yourself. The mind is a mirror. If it is clouded by our own fears, desires, and prejudices, we will project those onto others and misinterpret their intentions." The king frowned slightly. "But how do I begin to understand myself? My mind is filled with so many thoughts. How do I quiet them to see clearly?" The blind brother explained, "The path to self-understanding begins with mindfulness and self-reflection. Spend time each day observing your own thoughts without judgment. Notice how your mind reacts to different situations, what makes you angry, what brings you joy, and what causes you fear. As you become more aware of your inner workings, you will find that your reactions to others become more measured and compassionate." He continued, "Remember, Your Majesty, that understanding yourself also means embracing your flaws and strengths. The more honest you are with yourself, the more genuine your understanding of others will be. People reflect the energy you bring to them. If you approach them with clarity and authenticity, they will respond in kind." The king listened intently, his expression thoughtful. "You are saying that the ability to read others begins with mastering one's own mind." "Exactly," the blind brother said. "Your mind is like a lamp. When it shines brightly and steadily, it illuminates everything around you. But when it flickers or is clouded, it casts shadows and creates illusions. Clear your mind, and the truth will reveal itself effortlessly, not just about others, but about the world itself. The king bowed deeply. "I understand now. The journey to understanding others and leading with wisdom begins within. I am grateful for your guidance." The blind brother smiled. "May you carry this wisdom with you, Your Majesty, and use it to bring light to your kingdom. Remember, the greatest leaders are those who see clearly, feel deeply, and act with compassion." The king left the blind brother's hut for the final time, a changed man. He spent the following years cultivating mindfulness and self-awareness, becoming not just a wise king, but a source of inspiration for his people. And the lessons of the blind brother lived on, shared by the king with anyone who sought to understand the profound power of the mind.